The sky over Zilara glowed with two suns. It was a world filled with floating cities, advanced machines, and a proud alien race called the Zilari. They were tall, elegant, and intelligent. They believed in strength, beauty, and perfection. Anything that did not meet those values was hidden or cast aside. In the quiet back area of the capital, far from the shining towers and polished streets, a small home sat alone. Inside it lived a girl named Thera. She had pale blue skin like the rest of her kind and glowing purple eyes. But unlike them, she could not walk or speak. Her legs were weak, and her voice had never come. From birth, her people called her cursed. Her parents tried to care for her, but fear and shame grew heavy in their hearts. Zilari culture believed that anyone born with such defects had done something wrong in a past life. It was cruel. It was cold. But it was tradition. So Thera grew up mostly alone, sitting by the window, watching the world she was not allowed to be a part of. Every day she saw ships flying by. Sometimes she'd hear the laughter of other children in the distance. Her hands were clever. She could carve patterns into stone, build little models from scraps, but no one paid attention. To them, she was a mistake. Then, one day, something different happened. A large white and silver spacecraft landed in the open fields near her home. The human relief vessel Hope Seeker had arrived. They had come to provide medical aid, food supplies, and new learning tools for poor Zilari communities. The humans were known for their kindness, but most Zilari still saw them as primitive. Ray was one of the human volunteers. He was in his early 30s with a kind face, rough hands, and curious eyes. He wasn't a doctor or a leader. He was a mechanic, someone who fixed things. But he had a habit of wandering. He liked to see what others ignored. On his third day, on Zilara, while delivering energy modules to a nearby station, Ray took a different path back to the ship. That's when he saw her, Thera, sitting alone by a stone wall, her legs folded under her, eyes staring into the wind. She didn't run. She didn't wave. She just watched him. Something about her silence stopped him in his tracks. Ray walked closer. "Hey there," he said softly. "I'm Ray. I'm a human." She didn't reply, but she didn't look away either. Ray sat down on the ground, a respectful distance away. He pulled out a small tool from his belt and started fixing a broken sensor in his hand. He glanced at her. She was watching with sharp eyes. Her fingers moved slightly, tapping a rhythm on the stone. "Are you interested in machines?" he asked. She tilted her head slightly, still silent, still watching. Ray didn't push. He returned the next day, and the day after. Each time he brought a different gadget, a spinning solar wheel, a hovering ball, a voice recording chip. Every time. Thera looked a little closer. Sometimes she would tap out patterns or gently reach out and touch the tools. By the 5th day, Ray brought a broken visual sensor and laid it in front of her. He didn't fix it. He just smiled and said, "You try." To his surprise, she did. With slow, careful hands, she opened the panel and studied the wires. She didn't speak, but her eyes narrowed in focus. Within minutes, she twisted the wires, in the right place. The sensor flickered back to life. Ray blinked. "You fixed it," he whispered. She looked at him and for the first time smiled. It was a small thing. But it felt like the universe shifted. Ray began asking the other human volunteers about Thera. No one knew her story. The Zilari hosts didn't talk about her. When he asked one of the locals, they said quietly, "She is cursed. It's better if you stay away." But Ray couldn't. He saw something in her that others refused to see: intelligence, curiosity, and strength. So he started working on something new. In his free time, he went through the storage compartments of Hope Seeker, collecting spare parts: servo motors, joint pads, power lines, and AI chips. His plan? Build a basic exosuit, something that could support her legs and maybe, just maybe, help her stand. It wouldn't be perfect. It wouldn't be beautiful. but it could give her a chance. Days passed, then a week. Ray returned again, this time carrying a strange-looking belt with joint attachments and small metal rods. Thera looked confused, unsure. Ray knelt beside her and gently showed how it worked. "It's to help you walk," he said, placing the rods gently along her legs. "I can't promise it'll work perfectly, but I think you can do it." She looked at him, eyes wide, almost afraid, but she nodded. With the device strapped around her and Ray supporting her arms, Thera leaned forward. The motors whirred softly. Her knees trembled. For a moment it looked like she would fall. Then, her foot moved. A single step. Then another. It was shaky. It was awkward. But she was walking. A group of Zilari nearby stopped and stared. No one spoke. A few gasped. One whispered, "That's the broken girl." Ray held her steady, smiling with tears in his eyes. "No," he said. "She's not broken. She's brilliant." Thera stood taller, not just because of the suit, but because for the first time in her life, someone believed in her, and that changed everything. For the first time in her life, Thera stood tall. Her legs shook, the metal supports humming softly beneath her. Ray stood beside her, ready to catch her if she fell. But she didn't. Step by step, Thera walked a short circle, then looked at him with shining eyes. No words came from her mouth, but none were needed. Her smile, her steady hands, and her first steps said more than 100 voices. Ray smiled back. "You did it," he whispered. "You did it, Thera." But the moment didn't stay private for long. 2 young Zilari passed by carrying food supplies. They paused, staring at her. One of them laughed, not kindly. "Look, the cursed girl is pretending to be normal." The other whispered, "Why is the human wasting his time on her?" Ray heard the words. He turned, not angry, but firm. "She's not cursed. She's just never been given a chance." They walked away, still whispering. Thera's smile faded just a little. She looked down, ashamed, but Ray gently touched her shoulder. "Don't listen to them," he said softly. "What you did today was amazing." He helped her sit back down, removed the exosuit carefully, and stored it in his bag. "We'll make it better," he promised. "Lighter, faster, and maybe I can teach you to build your own." Thera tilted her head with interest. From that day on, they met every morning. Ray brought tools, batteries, and small circuits. Thera brought her sharp mind. She couldn't speak, but she learned fast. With gestures, drawings, and a few human-made translation chips, they built a language between them. Ray noticed something else too. Thera wasn't just clever. She was gifted. She understood how energy flowed through wires without being told. She redesigned one of Ray's failed battery packs to hold double the charge. She even improved the motor in her own exosuit, making it run quieter and more smoothly. "Thera," Ray said one evening, watching her solder a thin metal strip with perfect precision, "you don't just understand machines. You feel them." Thera smiled and nodded, then wrote something on a slate. "Machines listen. People do not." Ray read it and felt a lump form in his throat. She was right. But not everyone ignored her now. Rumors started to spread. A few curious Zilari children came close. One afternoon, they stood at a distance watching as Thera worked on a floating camera drone with Ray. One brave child asked, "Is it true you made her walk?" Ray answered, "No, she made herself walk. I just gave her tools." They stared at Thera. She looked back but didn't smile. She had learned not to trust easily. Later, the village elder arrived. Her name was Vailari, and her long robes shimmered with golden threads. She stood tall, arms crossed, her expression cold. "Human," she said in a firm voice. "This experiment must stop." Ray stood, wiping oil from his hands. "It's not an experiment. She's learning. She's improving." "She is cursed," Vailari replied. "We have rules for a reason. Zilari value strength. We do not promote weakness. Your actions may disturb the balance. Ray looked at Thera. She was watching them, silent, her hands gripping her slate. Ray turned back to the elder. She's not weak. You just never gave her a chance to be strong. Valari's eyes narrowed. Be careful, human. There are places where tradition matters more than kindness. With that, she turned and left. That night, Ray couldn't sleep. He sat in his corner of the Hope Seeker, surrounded by half-finished projects and tools. In the dim light, he played back a recording of Thera walking, then another of her fixing the broken visual sensor. He uploaded both to a private file and sent it to an old contact, Professor Helena Drax, a well-respected Zellari scientist and an advocate for ethical tech development. Along with the files, he wrote, "There's a girl here, she's being hidden because of her condition, but she's smarter than any engineer I've ever met. She just needs a voice. Please watch this." He sent the message and leaned back, tired but hopeful. 2 days passed. Then a reply came. Helena's message was short but powerful. I saw the footage. I want to meet her. Ray smiled. When he told Thera the news, she looked nervous but excited. She scribbled on her slate, "Will they take me away?" Ray shook his head. "Only if you want to go. This is your choice. Always your choice." Thera stared at the stars that night. Her world had always been small, just a room, a window, and silence. Now it felt like it was opening. The next morning, Professor Helena arrived in a sleek black transport. She stepped out dressed in soft armor, her eyes filled with curiosity. Unlike the others, she didn't look at Thera with pity. Instead, she knelt down and said, "I saw your work, it's brilliant." Thera's hands trembled as she typed on a portable pad. "They say I'm broken." Helena read it and replied gently, "They're wrong. You're proof that intelligence has no limits." She looked at Ray. This girl's mind could change the future. Why hasn't anyone given her tools before? Ray shrugged. Because they only saw what she lacked, not what she had. Helena nodded. Let's change that. That evening, Thera was invited to the Zellari Scientific Forum. At first, it was just a request. Then it became a demand. Not everyone liked what they saw. The council argued. Some called her a threat to tradition. Others called her a symbol of hope. But the people had seen the videos. More and more Zellari children were watching. They saw a girl who had once been ignored now building machines better than anyone. Change was coming, slowly but surely, and at the center of it all stood Thera, the girl who could not speak, who could not walk, until someone believed in her. The invitation to speak at the Zellari Scientific Forum was a turning point. It was something no one had expected. Not Ray, not Thera, and certainly not the elders of the village. When Thera read the message, her hands trembled. Ray gently placed his hand over hers and said, "You don't have to go if you're scared." Thera looked at him, then slowly picked up her stylus and wrote on the screen, "I'm not scared. I'm ready." Ray smiled with pride. "Then let's get to work." Over. The next few days, they worked harder than ever. Thera upgraded her exosuit, adding lightweight alloy braces and a silent movement system. She also designed a new voice synthesizer chip that could speak the words she typed in real time. Ray helped solder the tiny wires and attach the chip near her collar. When it activated, it spoke her first full sentence in a calm and clear voice. "Hello, my name is Thera." Ray clapped his hands and laughed. "That's perfect, you're going to amaze them." But not everyone was happy. Word spread quickly around the village. Some people were curious, even excited, but others grew uneasy. "She's cursed," one merchant whispered in the market. "Now they want her to speak in front of our leaders?" An elder growled, "This is the human's fault, he's changing things too quickly." Others said nothing but watched with cold eyes. Ray felt the tension. He noticed fewer smiles, more turned backs. But he didn't stop. Thera didn't stop either. They had come too far to turn back. One evening, just before their journey to the forum, Thera and Ray were walking through the village when someone threw a stone. It hit the ground near Thera's feet. She stopped, her suit freezing in place. Ray spun around, heart racing. A small group of villagers stood at a distance. One of them shouted, "Leave her alone, human, you're making her think she's something she's not." Ray stepped forward. "She is something. She's brilliant, brave, stronger than any of you," another voice barked. "You're destroying our ways." Ray didn't reply this time. He turned to Thera, who was staring at the stone. Slowly, she reached down, picked it up and placed it in her satchel. Ray looked at her, confused. Thera typed a message and played it aloud. "Even broken things can be useful." Ray's eyes welled up. The next morning, they boarded the transport to the Zilari capital. The city was stunning. Tall crystal towers, floating bridges, and sky trains gliding through the clouds. But as Thera stepped off the transport with Ray by her side, she didn't look at the buildings. She looked ahead, focused on what she had to do. The Zilari Scientific Forum was held in a large circular hall. Dozens of scientists, engineers, and council members sat in curved rows, watching her every move. Some looked curious, others looked annoyed. Ray helped her up to the central platform. Helena Drax, the respected scientist who had supported her, introduced her. "Ladies and gentlemen of Zilara," Helena said, "this is Thera. You know her as the disabled girl from the outer villages. Today she speaks not as a symbol of pity, but of potential." Helena stepped back. Thera took a deep breath and tapped her pad. Her voice chip came to life. "I was born with a body that doesn't work like yours. You called me cursed, useless, broken, but I am not broken, I am not useless, I am different, and I can build, I can learn, I can lead." A quiet murmur moved through the audience. Thera continued, "You say weakness is shameful, but I say denying someone a chance is the real weakness. This exosuit didn't change me. It helped me show who I already was. And there are many others, like me, hidden away, waiting for someone to believe in them." She paused. Her fingers tapped again. "I am not asking you to change your traditions. I am asking you to open your eyes." When the speech ended, silence filled the hall. Then someone clapped, then another. Then the hall erupted in applause, soft at first but growing louder and louder. Ray stood beside her, speechless. That night, the footage of Thera's speech was shared across the galactic network. Millions watched it. On other worlds, people cried. On Zilara, young Zilari who had been hiding their conditions felt seen for the first time. Messages poured in from parents, students, engineers. Some called her brave. Some called her the future. But the old leaders were not pleased. The council met in secret the next day. "She threatens the balance, Mir," said Elder Velari. "We cannot let outsiders decide what makes a true Zilari." "But the people are listening to her," another replied. "She's becoming a symbol." Velari slammed her hand on the table. "Then we must control the symbol, before it controls us." Meanwhile, Thera returned to her village. Things had changed. The same children who once avoided her now ran to show her their drawings. One even asked if she could help fix his learning tablet. Some adults offered kind words, though a few still looked at her with doubt. Thera didn't seek their approval. She was already thinking ahead. She turned to Ray one morning and typed, "Let's build something bigger." Ray smiled. "What do you have in mind?" She tapped her screen and her voice replied, "A place where no one is cast aside. A place for minds, not bodies." And so, in the quiet of the village workshop, Thera and Ray began designing the blueprint for the galaxy's first inclusive technology school, a place where anyone, no matter how they were born, could learn, create, and rise. The name Thera was no longer unknown. Her speech at the Zilari Scientific Forum had spread across planets. On human worlds, alien colonies, and even rival empires, people watched the recording of the quiet girl in the mechanical suit, standing with courage and speaking with a machine voice. Her message was simple but powerful. Everyone deserves a chance. Back in her village, Thera and Ray were working hard. They cleared out an old storeroom beside her home and turned it into a small lab. with parts Ray brought from the Hope Seeker and leftover materials from the village. They built benches, power units, and learning modules. Ray placed a new sign outside the door. It read, Thera's Workshop, open to all. At first, only a few came, mostly children and curious teenagers. But as weeks passed, more people arrived. Some were from other villages, some were young, Zalari born with injuries or mental differences, hidden away like Thera once was. One boy named Kel had an artificial arm, but no one ever showed him how to use it properly. Thera gave him a toolkit and said through her voice chip, "You can build your own control system." With her help, Kel made his arm work better than anything the doctors had given him. A girl named Alari came next. She had trouble focusing and speaking in front of others. But Thera taught her how to use visual coding blocks, and Alari ended up designing a learning app for children who didn't like reading. Soon, word of Thera's school reached the media. A journalist team from a neutral galactic news channel requested to visit. At first, Ray was unsure. "You don't have to do this," he told Thera, but she typed, "Let them see what others never wanted to see." The crew arrived with cameras, drones, and translators. They expected a dusty village and a girl with a story. Instead, they found a growing center of learning, buzzing with students' inventions and hope. They filmed Thera guiding a child through programming an interface, helping a blind Zalari teen install a sonic detector, and adjusting the energy flow in her own exosuit. When the interview began, the lead reporter asked, "Do you see yourself as a leader now?" Thera typed, and her voice chip responded, "No, I am still a student. I just refuse to be silent anymore." That line became the headline of the broadcast. "I refuse to be silent anymore, Thera's mission for change." Within days, more visitors arrived. Scientists, doctors, and students from other planets came to see the girl who had been rejected, now teaching others to rise. But with attention came pressure. The Zalari High Council was divided. Some members, especially the younger ones, wanted to honor Thera and support her school. Others, like Elder Velari, still saw her as a challenge to their ancient values. "She's gaining too much influence," Velari warned. "This school promotes weakness as strength." Another elder replied, "She promotes access. She's changing lives." The council finally made a decision. Thera would be invited to speak at the Galactic Unity Summit. It was the largest gathering of species in the known universe, leaders, thinkers, and policymakers from hundreds of worlds. The invitation came with conditions: no protests, no political speeches, just a simple talk. When Thera read it, her hands froze. Ray sat beside her and asked, "What do you want to do?" Thera stared at the stars for a long moment, then typed, "I will speak, but I won't stay silent just to please them." The summit was held on a neutral space station orbiting a twin star system. Security was tight. Thousands of guests arrived, in shining vessels and diplomatic shuttles. When Thera walked into the grand hall, guided by Ray and Helena Drax, the crowd turned to look. She wore a polished version of her exosuit, trimmed with blue and silver. Her eyes were calm. Her steps were steady. Many had heard her name. Few had seen her in person. The host introduced her simply, "Please welcome Thera of Zalara, engineer, innovator, and founder of the first inclusive tech institute in her region." She stepped forward. The crowd went silent. She raised her hand and tapped the pad. Her voice echoed clear and steady. "I used to believe I was invisible, that I was born to be hidden, because that's what my people taught me. They called me broken. I believed them for a while, until someone looked at me and said, 'You can build.' Now I say the same to others. You can build, you can learn, you can lead. Not in spite of your difference, but through it." She paused and looked across the audience. "Odres isn't about leaving people behind. It's about pulling them forward. If I can do it, anyone can, if you give them the tools." The room stayed quiet for 3 long seconds. Then applause began. It grew louder and louder. Not from everyone, but enough. Enough to shake the hall. Enough to shake the council chambers back home. After the summit, Donations and offers of support flooded into Thera's small school. She turned none of them away, but kept her rules clear. No control, no politics, only learning and equality. She and Ray expanded the workshop into a full center. With Helena's help, they opened a satellite school on another Zilari colony. Thera gave virtual talks to students on 6 planets, but she remained the same. Calm, focused, humble. One night after repairing a damaged drone, Ray sat beside her, under the stars. "You've changed the world," he said. Thera shook her head and typed, "No, I just showed them what they ignored." Ray smiled. "And what will you do next?" Thera looked up at the stars. "I will find more like me, and give them what you gave me." Ray nodded, because he knew, when the world watches, real change starts with belief, and Thera had become the voice for millions who had none. Years had passed since Thera first stood with the help of a machine. Now she walked freely, not just on her world, but on many others. Her name had become a symbol. Her voice chip, once a strange sound in the silence, was now known across the stars. Her school, once a small workshop in a forgotten village, had grown into a full academy. It was called the Unified Path Institute, a place where no one was turned away. Zilari, humans, and other species came there, especially those with physical or mental challenges. The walls of the new academy were covered with solar plates. The halls echoed with soft sounds of machines, laughter, and learning. Students worked in open labs designing tools that helped others. One student built a speech device that worked with eye movement. Another created a floating wheelchair powered by brain signals. At the center of it all was Thera. She had changed, but only in strength and confidence. Her mind had always been brilliant. Now the world finally saw it. Ray still walked beside her, older now but always smiling. He didn't like to be called her teacher anymore. "She teaches me now," he would often say to guests. "I just helped her take the first step." One day, the president of the Galactic Council invited Thera to join the Galactic Innovation Assembly as a permanent advisor. It was a high honor. Many leaders from powerful planets respected her now, but Thera refused. She typed, "I don't want to sit in meetings. I want to stay with the learners." She did agree, however, to help design a universal inclusion policy, a law that made sure every planet had learning spaces open to all people, no matter their ability. This law was named the Thera Initiative. Despite her fame, Thera never left her roots. She returned to her home village once a year. The old house where she had once watched the sky in silence was still there. Her parents, now older and softer, welcomed her with quiet pride. They had once hidden her. Now they told others, "That's our daughter, the one who changed everything." Ray and Thera sat near the window that day. It was the same spot where they had first seen each other. Ray smiled and asked, "Do you remember what I said the first time I saw you?" Thera tapped her pad. "Hey there, I'm Ray. I'm a human." They both laughed. "You remember everything," he said. Thera nodded. Then she wrote, "Because it was the first time someone saw me as a person." One day, a young Zilari girl arrived at the school. Her name was Seelan. She had been born without arms and used her feet to write, draw, and even eat. Her village had tried to hide her just like they had with Thera, but her older brother had heard of the institute and traveled for days to bring her there. When Thera met her, Seelan lowered her head, nervous. Thera walked closer and knelt down. She gently placed her voice chip near her throat and spoke. "You are not a mistake, you are a creator." Seelan looked up, her eyes wide. For the first time, she smiled. Later that week, she helped build a leg-powered robotic glove, her first invention. The world around them continued to grow, new machines, new discoveries. But many still needed guidance, hope, and the tools to move forward. Thera gave all three. When a planet with war refugees asked for help building an accessible school, she traveled there herself. When a blind child in a deep mining colony couldn't attend lessons, She designed a device to translate words into sound vibrations on the skin. Thera never saw problems as dead ends. She saw them as blueprints waiting to be built. One galactic news outlet wrote, "In a world where machines rule and beauty is praised, one girl showed that the strongest force is belief, in oneself and in others." But Thera didn't care. For praise. One evening, Ray asked her, "You've done so much. What do you want to do now?" She typed, "I want to find the others, the ones still waiting." "Waiting for what?" he asked. "For someone to say, 'I believe in you.'" On the anniversary of her first step, the school held a celebration. Hundreds came. Students, leaders, families, even Elder Valari came, no longer filled with pride or anger, but with quiet respect. She approached Thera and said, "I once called you a mistake. I was wrong." Thera responded, "You weren't alone. Many thought the same." Valari looked down. "But only you proved us wrong." That night, under the twin moons of Zalara, the students lit a sky lantern for every life that had been changed by Thera's journey, the sky filled with soft, floating lights. Thera stood in silence, holding one last lantern. Ray walked over. "For someone special?" She nodded and tapped her screen. "For the girl I used to be, the one who waited by the window." And then, with her hand steady and strong, she released the light into the sky.